Chief Justice Toll. I think that we all just heard a great presentation from her, so if you'll all join me in welcoming her. She'd like to do this an interactive session, so I'm going to be passing around the mic for anybody that has questions for her as she starts. Okay? Please help.
Thanks very much. Of course, this is a great privilege for me to have a chance to really dialogue with y'all about what we've been doing with civics education in South Carolina. I know we may not be able to keep Justice O'Connor here the whole time. There are other workshops that may snitch her off, but Justice O'Connor, she is the inspiration. I'm just the spare carrier, but very honored to have been so for this wonderful iCivics really movement now that I think is gaining a lot of traction all over the country. As I explained in the session when I keynoted, there are two dynamics here that are both very exciting, one of which is capturing the imagination of the students with the use of the kind of video gaming that they love and play a lot and are very comfortable with anyway, and following that up with using the kind of technology that they are very comfortable with. And that's part of it. I frankly do not think in the future that we're going to be able to do classroom teaching on really any level, whether it be in primary and secondary school, in college, or in judicial education, simply by use of the old stand-up discussions. We're going to have other means. We've all died of the death of PowerPoints now. That was an early attempt to get us more engaged with the visuals, but the new technology is really an amazing device for transmitting information and getting people to interact with information. And the gaming format is an absolutely brilliant way to capture students' interest in subject matter that is really not mandatorily taught much of any place now, and that is the Civics Platform. The statistics you saw on the board, but it's really goes beyond what people don't know about their court system or about their government. We really have a whole generation now of folks in governmental or political life that disdain government. In my day, government service was certainly something to be aspired to, an aspirational goal that was attractive to anybody, a respected leadership position in the community. That's just not the case now. And it's not all the fault of the recipients of the information, and it's not all the fault of an educational system that doesn't value teaching about government, although some of that certainly bears responsibility. But we live in a different time now, globally, where authority is very much questioned and where you really have to prove yourself. And that old adage that we had up on the screen about you fear what you don't know is so true about government. And yet, as I look at some of the emerging democracies, and as I look at some of our very close neighbors and see what's happening with societies that have a governmental system that's just like ours, but doesn't work because there isn't public confidence in government, then I say we've got a big job to do. My heart breaks with what's happening in Mexico right now, and I know I speak for everybody in this room. Their governmental system is in collapse, is in complete crisis now, with no real stability in policing, in their basic court system, which is riddled with corruption. How do you regain the people's confidence when that level of violence and attack on social order is taking place? One would think that there's so much stability in this country, even with the ups and downs we face economically, that it could never happen. But ignorance about what government is and what it means and how it works and what real value it has in your life is a big disincentive to having a stable democratic society. So I don't think it's too much to say that capturing the imagination of this new generation of students who don't have a lot of preconceptions one way or another is an enormous move towards a more just society for the United States. And I feel it's just that important and just that high level. So let's get down to some of the specifics of what we're doing at home. I explained to you that my start was to convene a group and use kind of the prestige of my office, and I think you ought to insist that court leaders in your communities use the prestige of their office, not just to convene a group and let them go their way, but get involved personally. It means a whole lot to this group to have Justice O'Connor sitting in our midst talking about this subject. But back home in your communities, your trial judges and your members of your Supreme Court have enormous impact on a group just by being there and saying, I'm going to be hands-on, I'm going to sit in a group and around a table and try to make this happen. So it starts with that. But getting together some educators right away to see the second value, which is what impact could we have on the way teaching is done in our state if we got a piece of the curriculum keyed to the state standards and it involved the use of this kind of new technology in the pedagogy of the state. That's the other thing, that's the other little piece, and I don't know if Justice O'Connor visioned that when she started, but the other little piece I'm trying to work on in my state is that second piece. What does it mean for the teaching profession of South Carolina to have some ability through free material and training that we can provide, be able to upgrade their teaching skills? We've gotten 2 universities in South Carolina to agree to give education credits during the summertime for teachers that I've got and I am subsidizing in terms of their tuition to go and learn how to use the new media in their classroom. And we use iCivics as a very good component of that particular course that they take. That's huge for them because they get credit. And teachers, that means something in their salaries to get that kind of credit. But it also spreads the word that this isn't some kind of funky thing that kids play on the Android. This is a legitimate teaching tool that should be in classrooms, is valuable in classrooms, and can work. And the key to that is having the teachers become adept at manipulating the material along with a very good lesson plan that is keyed to their standards and marches the kids through material that they can learn and be tested. I can tell you, my little students in that country middle school that I described to y'all, where we piloted iCivics in South Carolina, they blew the top off of the state test when they finally took it. I mean, blew it away. You're talking about the State Department was coming down there and saying, if we didn't know what this was, we would be checking y'all for honesty because there were so many kids who had almost perfect scores on their standardized test. I mean, that's how much they learned. But they learned it because they didn't just stop in the classroom. It was cool. It was something they took home. Now, years ago in the dark ages when the planet was practically glacial, we used to take things home from the classroom too because we entertained ourselves in my generation by reading Nancy Drew. And so we took those reading skills home and we used them to entertain ourselves with other material. Well, this is another way of doing that. It's a more modern way of doing that. Now, you saw the picture of Dr. Jane Brailsford. She was my master teacher that I got involved. This is, a 28-year veteran of teaching in a big school district next door to the Capitol. But it's a good example for me because it's got country, it's got urban, it's got a lot of different things. And she has been the social studies coordinator there for a good long time. She took this thing and ran with it. She initially did that pilot that I explained to you they did in that test, that period of time, that dead time at the end of school after the classes are over, but you still got tests to take, when the kids go wild and don't have any kind of direction. That's when we piloted iCivics, and it gave them something to do. It focused them on something. It was a lot of fun. So she expanded that to what became an 8-week program in iCivics as a part of their social studies. And then I thought to myself, well, what would happen if we had somebody like that who really gets it and understands and is a master teacher and can communicate with teachers like I can? I'm not a teacher. I love them, but I don't know what they go through, and I don't know what their skill set is. So how if I had someone like that who could really get this going? So I scrounged around and in my own budget for the South Carolina Judicial Branch, and in several other places, including that United States District Court Judges Library Fund and some other places I went to. I put together the money to hire her for a year. She has taken a sabbatical from her school district, and for 1 year, she is going around South Carolina meeting with social studies coordinators in all the school districts, meeting with teachers, meeting with groups, meeting with Boy Scout and Girl Scout troops, and all kind of different organizations that will embrace the use of this technology. The other thing that we did was to start to get some other people involved. Young lawyers are looking for ways to do pro bono. This generation of lawyers is not like the generation of the 80s and the 90s. They are, even in the face of this economic calamity we're in, they are more public service oriented, I have found, and that's after 45 years in the legal profession. I can tell you, this group that's coming through right now has kind of re-energized themselves about wanting to get involved with pro bono service. So we went to the young lawyers, and through them to other groups of young professionals who know something about the court system, even though they're not lawyers. You know, it's an amazing thing. Do y'all know that all wisdom does not reside in lawyers? Do y'all know, certainly NACM knows, that you don't have to have a law degree to be a very, very sophisticated specialist in the court system? Y'all know that, don't you? Don't let judges or lawyers tell you any different. But there are a lot of folks who love the idea of getting involved, and of course they speak to the teachers, because the teachers don't have law degrees either, except for the rare teacher that does. So if you involve some other folks and involve young people, they really love getting out in the community. Now this is just a kind of survey of what Jane Brailsford and these young students have been doing. In March through May of this year, they did an 8-day Our Court experience for 8th grade students, and they did it in the time period between the high-stakes accountability testing and the end of school. That's a period we've been using now. We kind of feel like that's ours. That's iCivics time. They then participated in digital gaming, small group and large group collaboration. They had presenters. You can tailor this thing to all kinds of different groups. And again, you start with in school, and then if they really love it, you can capture some of their out of school time as well. In the fall of this past year, we then embedded in a high school course 2 9-week iCivics exploratory courses. And they, again, emphasize small and large group collaboration, gaming, as well as the pedagogy of learning the material. A follow-up course for 10th graders. We now have iCivics as a recognized grade elective in social studies in 10th grade. And in the spring, we then had regional workshops, and this is for the teachers, starting to get down into the regions to teach them how to use this material. Some teachers told me, I have never seen a group of educators so reluctant to break for lunch. Now that's how fired up the teachers got about learning to use this stuff. Then this year, we've again had the middle school experience at the end of school, right before graduation. I got one of my buddies to call Chick-fil-A again, and I was almost ashamed to even think about it. I said, I can't raise money, but you're going to have to go to him and tell him that I need 850 coupons. Glad to do it. Glad to be a part of civics education. You'd be amazed at what happens. You know, a lot of businesses and other people that you don't normally touch in court work really get it about how serious the threat to our form of government is of having people so uneducated about what really happens in court. They get it about how perilous it is if Americans' only idea about what happens with the court system is the Anthony case. They understand that. And if you reach out to the business community, they want to have the association and really the prestige of being associated with you as court managers and with something that you're doing out in the communities. We undersell ourselves so much. We live back in how, you know, the legislature hates us and doesn't give us the money, and we're so disrespected by everybody, and the general public is furious with us, and particularly if they lose a case in court. We just get all inward about things like that. But the truth about it is we have enormous credibility in the larger community that we're just not building on. And this iCivics, I'm not kidding you, it hits all the right bells, trying to improve education, trying to get it educating kids when you can still capture their mind, doing something that gives more stability to the community. All those kind of bells and whistles make this something that you can communicate to groups that you don't normally communicate with. And frankly, once I get a Boeing Corporation to say, yeah, Gene, we get this. They just moved to South Carolina. If anybody's here from Washington State, don't shoot me, but we love them. But, you know, Boeing understood. And now they're one of my biggest supporters for I started out with a little thing with iCivics. They let loose all their lobbyists to support my state budget last year. And I built on that to get a whole new group of business people involved in supporting judicial funding in South Carolina, and it started out of reaching out to them and trying to do a little something to improve civics education. I'm just telling you, this thing has dimensions that are far beyond just a program about civics. So I'm going to quit preaching a sermon now. I've preached enough. Let's talk, you and I, about what to do. As you can tell, we've got different groups involved in reaching out. We've got a great master teacher involved. But there's going to come a time when it's going to have to sustain itself. And what we're trying awfully hard to do right now is to get enough different kind of people, not all lawyers, not all this, not all that, involved, that being a part of a project that involves civic education is going to be just as routine as the other things you build into your organization. And that helps give a little synergy with a lot of other things that are out there. You've got a lot of things in your community. Your bar supports law-related education, I feel sure. There are probably many other things in your community, from mock trials to all kinds of things that try to touch the student population with information about government and the courts. This is yet another bells and whistles kind of wow factor type way to start to build some synergy between the various people who are out there in the community trying to make a difference about government and civics education. End of filibuster. Questions, observations, thoughts? Yes, ma'am.
Aside from the in-classroom, are there any components, or is there anything in the program that could be used in other areas besides in schools, like Boys and Girls Clubs?
You know, it's all
like
on the web. So you go to www.icivics.com, it's all there. And that's what's so wonderful about it, is it isn't just linked to being in a classroom and having a teacher monitor whatever you're doing. These kids play games with each other all the time. I play it. Bill and I compete. I think it's fun. But there are a lot of different ways you can use it. We did it in his Sunday school class the other day, and we did it with fourth graders and fifth graders. Everybody told me when we got started, well, you know, Justice O'Connor, she's up in the rarefied atmosphere somewhere, Gene. She doesn't understand it. Middle schoolers in South Carolina, they are not going to be able to use it. They don't have any information base for this. Oh, man, don't ever gauge anybody that way. Of course they got it. And now I got kids in 4th and 5th grade playing this game and using terms like the Attorney General does this and that and the other. I mean, so yes is the long answer to that. It's got a lot of wonderful dynamic because it's web-based. It's on the web. If you got some connectivity, and now, as we know, with iPhones and iPads and all this kind of thing, Androids and Blackberries, people got connectivity every place. So it's got a lot of utility because it's web-based that isn't restricted to just, you know, using it in the classroom.
Just 1 second.
What strategies have you begun to develop for sustainability for this program?
The biggest part is to try to get a bunch of community people involved in being volunteers and learning about how to take iCivics out to classrooms, helping Jane go to yet another teacher's classroom and demonstrate and monitor and get it out that way. Because in the end, I'm not going to have master teacher to go around every day for the rest of time. But, for example, the 6 that I had go to get the college credit, the post graduate credit for learning how to use media-based technology this summer, they've all, because I gave it to them free, they've all agreed that they will each teach 6 teachers. And that's the kind of thing you do. If you can get them involved and say, the thing I want most from you is if you'll reach out and get, like the old pyramid scheme, if you'll get a couple more people to do this as well. And that's really, with this kind of a voluntary effort, you're going to find some financial support where you didn't think you had it to get it up and running. But you've really just got to get some folks that are enthusiastic about getting some other people in their community. And that's why I say the young people are really key to that. These young lawyers, I mean, some of these young ones have been out of law school 2 and 3 years. A lot of them are law clerks and other folks I see all the time. They can't wait to get back and tell me, what they did in a classroom. They say the only thing is, Chief, when we go out there and we do it in one classroom, we got so many requests from teachers. And I said, that's the way you get that other pal of yours that might be, your best buddy after work to go have a beer together. Tell them, you got to help me out with this. So that's kind of what we're doing.
Just a quick question. The iCivics.org, can we go on?
Absolutely.
Without a password?
Free.
Okay.
Go on.
Great.
Absolutely. That's the beauty of it. Anybody can go on it.
I'm with the federal court, so I really appreciated your comment this morning.
I know, Justice O'Connor, I did my usual rag on the federal court system saying that they in the rarefied atmosphere don't have enough book of business to fill 1 month in the state of New York.
That's not,
I knew somebody was going to get me on that.
No, I appreciate it. It was really amusing. I appreciate it. But what I wanted to mention was, and I'm sure Justice O'Connor is familiar, but the Federal Judicial Center of the federal courts has an Open Doors to Justice program, and I'm wondering if this iCivics program could in some way be tied into that, because once or twice a year they do a little scenario where that they put out there, and then courts can invite students in and learn something about like the jury system.
You just given me such a good idea, and I'm embarrassed to think that as well as I know some of the folks in the D.C. office that I haven't reached out. That's such a good idea. Yes, and what's so good about it is the court games are all based on federal court decisions, so it really really plays so much on what you all are doing anyway. Remind me, let's talk afterwards, and let me get the name of somebody I need to get in touch with. But I think that's great.
I'd be very happy to do
and
that.
iCivics nationally is located in Washington, so it won't be anything. And you talk about some bright young folks, the bright young folks that Justice O'Connor has as staffing this thing in Washington. They are absolutely blow your mind away, and now include some folks with graduate teaching and administrative teaching specialties, so they could get right with the folks at the National Center there.
Right. And just one other point, I think also we call it the Bench and Bar Fund in the district court that I work for. And I think that's something our judges are looking for projects with the bar associations that they can give a grant to go out. And so it sounds like that's something that bar associations across the country with the federal judges
exactly
working towards that could do.
The way we did it, when the federal district courts take that bench bar fund and fund something, they want either a governmental entity or something that's very well recognized as a 501c3 to accept the grant. And the way I did it is I let the South Carolina Judicial Branch be the applying entity, and then I also involve my state bar. So just like what you're saying, exact blueprint you're talking about. And that really works. And then there's all the financial accountability, because those two kind of organizations have their own reasons that they've got to account for grants and are very familiar with how to do it.
Hi, I've been thinking about doing this kind of work in New Mexico since I retired recently. And One question I wanted to ask you about, if you could talk a little more about, is to what degree is the what I see as an eroding appreciation for and respect for civil liberties and the importance of them among students and young people. To what extent is that entered into your work and your training?
Well, see, that all I can say is you will be so pleased when you look at the games to see how much they are oriented towards the civil liberties. I described the 5 cases that are used in one of the games, the student purse snatching case, the eminent domain case, Brown versus the Board of Education, Miranda. I mean, we use cases in these games that what it's keyed towards is you got to know what your rights are under the Bill of Rights, under the amendments. So it's very much keyed towards, what are civil liberties about? Because I'm kind of like you. When people get shocked about what happens in the court system, a lot of times it's because they don't understand the court system. Yes, ma'am.
I was wondering if there had been any thought to utilizing iCivics for adult education and/or maybe more specifically citizenship classes.
I'm so glad you asked that question with Justice O'Connor here, because Justice O'Connor, 3 people have asked me a similar question today, that being, how could we use this for citizens education, adult education? And I'll tell you what I have done I am piloting a big Access to Justice self-help center in a smaller county, and if it works, we're going to have it all over the state. That's another thing I just believe in so fervently, that people who don't qualify for free legal services but need access to the court are really being excluded, and we're doing something about that at home. Well, one of the things that I put in my self-help centers recently was the graphic novels I explained to y'all, the 3 graphic novels. And these are just ordinary folks that are coming there waiting to see one of my volunteers that will help them with, their divorce petition or whatnot. They love the graphic novels. And Stephanie Nye, my general counsel, who Justice O'Connor knows well, who's headed up iCivics for me from a court perspective, she said, Chief, if there's some way we could put something up to where we could start letting them use the iCivics games, I think it would be a great thing. So I think you got something there. I want to do some thinking with some of these young brains that are running iCivics in Washington about, are there things we could tweak about the accompanying materials that would go with it that would make it user-friendly for citizenship classes or just general public type folks who are coming to try to access the court system. I mean, self-help centers for access folks is a great way to utilize some of that. Yes, ma'am.
I'm from Las Cruces, New Mexico, and we're near El Paso, Texas. And bilingual education is big in our community, and I'm just wondering, are these programs and games available in Spanish also?
They are not yet. That is something that a lot of folks are starting to talk about now. And, if you get them fired up enough, one of these brainiacs is going to be the one that says, I volunteer to translate it, but we very much want to do that.
Okay.
That's a great, absolutely should be done.
I'm from the state of Florida. Have only been in judicial education for a year. I took a 15-year break to raise 4 children, and I, during the break earlier, called my family and talked to our 13-year-old and told her about the website, and I'm really enthusiastic about this. Our former Chief Justice Fred Lewis in the state of Florida has the Justice Teaching Institute, and I think there.
This would be like a hand in a glove of what Fred's doing.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
So very excited to have this opportunity.
Justice Toll, I'm Jeff Schrade from the Supreme Court in Arizona. And I might ask you to do a little bit more preaching. I just can't get enough of it. I love to hear you preach about it. But as court managers, I think it's easy to see the obligation that we have internally to process cases and to keep the doors of the courthouse open. But could you speak a little bit to the obligation we have externally as the judicial branch, the specific obligation we have to do these sort of things for the public that are more general?
Well, you know, I tell a lot of my folks that I take a very kind of practical, even selfish point of view about some of this. We are desperate in the state court systems for public support for what we do. We have to battle every year with our General Assemblies and state legislatures to try to even halfway keep judicial funding going. And, you know, I see outreach like this is putting a face on us that those legislators see. I had a group of legislators come earlier this year for a breakfast with me, and I had Jane Brailsford and some of the other teachers, and we put up some of the games and showed them what it worked, because I just wanted them to get a taste of it. Well, it changed the whole conversation, and I deliberately picked out some pretty Tea Party-oriented folks and some folks who were big leaders in the very minority Democratic leadership crowd, Legislative Black Caucus, Women's Caucus, etc. I very carefully picked folks from various points of view in our General Assembly. They left with such a different feeling about us and what we do when they saw some of my court managers that on their own time are doing this. Now they got a face to go with what we do. And I could have spent, you know, my whole State of the Judiciary speech trying to tell them what you do, Jeff, and it wouldn't have made any impact. But seeing them care about kids and this new way of trying to push civics education, it just changes the conversation so completely. So, yeah, I believe in it because I think the very future of the country depends on having a citizenry that knows and respects its government. But on a selfish basis, you just, once you start talking about a more neutral topic of kids and education and what we got to do, it gives you an entree into talking with your counterparts in government that's just completely different from trying to yang back and forth about who gets the money. You know, it becomes very crucial to keep the court system going when you demonstrate that it's not just what we do to keep the third branch going, it's what we are in the community. So all kind of good things come from that. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. I can say, too, that I really have an appreciation for what I've heard. I'm currently the clerk of the circuit court for Prince George's County, Maryland, but I did serve as a legislator for 8 years. And during that time, I really have a heart for our young people, and I had established a youth commission. And just sitting here listening, I see how this could really fit in because when I established it, and let me just say there was unanimous support, as a matter of fact. So what you're saying, if we could really get the young people involved, what I see is if we could use them as the vehicle to get it out, you know, because the plan was for them to, the young people to share the vision, have a voice, and influence the vote. And even right now, I'm still working towards that, like you said, to really get them involved and for people to really understand that oftentimes if you get young people involved, they have the brains too. There's so many things that they could come up with that we have not even thought of. So when you, and also community service hours are required, so you could utilize them in that way in order to graduate. Students still don't graduate because they don't have the community service hours. But if you could get them involved, because I'm sure they can do it with the technology, get the young people involved. I'm just getting excited just sitting here. When you said you would be coming to Washington, D.C., I'm right across the line, so I would love to have you work with me on that with this youth commission, because I think that's something that's really great, and the young people are really yearning for it. And like I said, I can see that same excitement.
Well, just emphasizing one more time what she said, I hadn't even thought about this, but wow, what a good idea. Those public service hours that they have to have now in many of the schools across the country. Wow, if they get involved with helping with either their own classmates or some middle schoolers or whatever in the iCivics thing, it's absolute dynamite.
And see, that's what we're working towards. That was the plan, is for the young people to be involved, and this is the 9th through 12th grade, but part of their responsibility is to reach down even to the elementary school. I believe that we should start in kindergarten, you know, at that level and bring it up. So again, we're still working to get there, but I see it, you know, I see it happening. And as I go out and talk to the jurors, that's another thing, like you said, that surprise me as I go out as the clerk of the
Doesn't
court.
that blow your mind, what they know and what they don't know?
Yes. Yeah, many of them don't even really know why they're there. You know, they're there, but they don't understand it. But I can say that by the time I finish speaking to them and explaining to them the importance of their role, and I also emphasize that, you know, it could be someone who's close to you, and what frame of mind or how educated would you want them to be if they had to make the decision. But by the time they leave, they have a whole different mindset. So
Great.
I've been motivated to continue to talk to them, and like I said, to educate people.
Great
so
comment.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Oh, yes, ma'am. Excuse me. Blind as a bat. You're about 10 feet beyond my viewing screen here.
That's okay. Have you done any work in the juvenile court system with this program?
I've got some family court judges who are working with me, and they've got some kids in drug court, and actually that's been a fun thing. You know, now there are some folks you really got to keep motivated with whatever you got them in, and normally just, you know, giving them the DARE lecture is not going to do much. They're going to march through it because they got to do it in order to please the judge and get out of drug court and get their offense taken care of. But if you use this, and I've got 2 family court judges who are using it, and I appreciate your reminding. You know, everybody talks about therapeutic courts of one sort or another, but the therapeutic drug courts for juvenile offenders, this is a fun thing to do. And again, there you get some young lawyers or some young folks to do a little pro bono. They're interested in doing this anyway. You know, get a couple of them to try that.
Hi, ma'am, over here.
Yes,
Rod
sir.
Wetland from Scottsdale City Court. My question is, as a retired military vet, 20-plus years, has there been any thought in regards to the Uniform Code of Military Justice for your I-courts? And use the military
You know, that's a good idea. We don't have a game that really targets on that, but some bright vet that's just put in 20 years will come up with that game. I believe I need to take your name.
Okay, ma'am. Under one condition, if I can get it for the record, a photo with you and having to chase Justice O'Connor out here.
You got it.
If I could do that, you got a deal.
You got it. Well, now, I detect a lull in the crowd. I have 2 rules about speaking. Number 1, when I was in the legislature, I was the first woman to chair the Rules Committee, and I abolished the filibuster in the House of Representatives, a very beloved Southern tradition. It keeps you there listening to people for hours on end. So I don't believe in filibusters anymore. I also believe what my mother told me many years ago: honey, nobody ever fussed about a speech that lasted too short a period of time. So I'm looking and I'm saying that maybe these folks want to just kind of chat among themselves and relax a little bit. So I declare the session is adjourned.
If you can all fill out your eval form and give it to me, that would be great.
The inspiration right there.